Alright, in this video I'm going to, this is my Sentential Logic video number 4, and in the last video, number 3, I did a video on how to translate from English to SL, and in this video I'm going to do a video on how to translate from SL to English, and this is not nearly as hard as the SL to English. SL to English is much harder because there are lots of different words which can hint at certain connectives being there. However, given SL, we know what a certain connective means. However, when we get to predicate logic or quantificational logic, they're both hard. It's both difficult to translate there and back from PL to English and from English to PL. So, I guess I want to refer again to the logic book, because this is what I was taught logic with, and that's what I think is a good book for logic. And this book here, which is available for purchase on Kindle, does give you problems on translating from SL to English as well as from English to SL. Now, if you take a class of symbolic logic, they will, when you have problems when they give you like problems of how to translate from SL to English, they will have a bunch of letters or symbols, and they will have a bit of a ledger over here, or on top, which will tell you what each letter is supposed to mean, and therefore you just have to plug in, and thus you plug these things in and then you know what the English is. Now, over here I have S stands for Sue will graduate, T for Tom will graduate, B for Bill will graduate, and I have A for Bill has to go for another year, Y for Sue has to go for another year, and X for Tom has to go for another year. Now, I guess I would recommend that you watch if you don't know about this, if you don't have some idea about what all this means already, then I would highly recommend either going to watch those videos, or Dr. Jason J. Campbell does have some good videos on sentential logic as well, and there are other resources around with which is good for this as well. So I have basically 6 here which I want to talk about. As you can see, this one is probably the most complicated, and I'll explain why this is actually kind of simple, even though it looks terrible. But we'll start with number 1 here. We have X ampersand Y parens horseshoe B, which the ampersand we know means and the horseshoe we know means if then. So we know that if X and Y, then B. So we go to our ledger. What does X mean? X means Tom has to go for another year. Y means Sue has to go for another year. And Bill means Bill, and B means Bill will graduate. So the English of this is that if Sue and Tom must go for another year, then Bill will graduate. Now again, in this, it's not about the content. It's to learn logic. I would emphasize that it's not about knowing about content. It's about knowing how. It's about knowing about how to string things together, and about what connectives mean, and about basically what this whole thing, about what everything is. So these letters could be anything. Okay, they could be anything, and we would still have a correct translation. We could make X, Y, and B mean any number of things, and we would still have a right translation. A right translation from SL to English is about sticking to the way the sentence is. And I'm gonna make a video of Sentential Logic number 5, which is going to be about kind of showing how logic isn't about content. It's about basically it's contentless, and it's about how things come together, and it's about if we have a novel we are or a argument, we want to break it all down and show the bare bones, the bare connectives, about what everything is. So it's about the connectives and how they are strung together, and not what these letters mean. These letters can be anything. Okay, that's the point I'm making. Okay, now number 2, we have 2 connectives which are of importance. 2 wedges. Now a wedge means disjunction. Now ampersand is conjunction or and the wedge is disjunction or, which means if B or it means B or T or S is really what it is. So B and T means we could do like this. Either Bill or Tom will graduate, or Sue will. Because they're just a bunch of, it's a couple different disjunctions, and it's a couple different disjunctions, and that's really it. So the third one, this is really easy. But what is this triple bar? It means if and only if. But just for current references, a triple bar this means the same as S horseshoe T ampersand T horseshoe S. That if S then T and if T then S. So it's like a horseshoe, but it goes both ways, which is why the triple bar is not often. The triple bar is often used as this symbol instead, the double arrow. So how would we translate this? We know S means Sue graduates or Tom will graduate, so it'll be basically this: Sue will graduate if and only if Tom will. Now again, this translating from SL to English is not that hard. However, if I find the need to do it, because going from predicate logic to English is hard, and going from English to predicate logic is also very hard. So it's not. I mean, it's not easy. I shouldn't say it's hard. It's just not a walk in the park, I would say. Number 4, we have 2 different connectives: the horseshoe or the conditional, and the ampersand or the conjunction. So Y stands for Sue must go another year. So we go if Sue must go another, sorry for my bad handwriting, year, then Tom goes for another year. Tom goes for another year, and Bill graduates. So it's just saying that if Sue must go for another year, then Tom goes for another year, and Bill graduates. Now down to this difficult one. Let's see here. Hopefully you got that. I'm going to erase these, at least these 2, so I can write atop of number 5. So to kind of break down things, if you see a big thing like this with a bunch of disjuncts, now recognize that there are brackets which put a bunch of inside of a bracket we have ampersands, which means and connecting all these brackets are wedges or disjunctions. So we have connecting all of these different wedges. Wedge, 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 wedge. So this is kind of difficult, and I guess in the last video where I was talking about translation from English to SL, I talked about what it means, how to translate things with have at least or at most, like at least one or at least two or at most one or at most two. So I'm gonna give you a pretty good hint that this number 5 is either a at least or it is a at most. It's one of those two. But let's think about what we have here. We have tilde T ampersand tilde S ampersand tilde B. So either Tom doesn't graduate and Sue doesn't graduate and Bill doesn't graduate, or Sue does but Tom and Bill don't, or Tom does and Sue and Bill don't, or Bill does and Sue and Tom don't, or Sue and Tom do but Bill doesn't. Tom and Bill does but Sue doesn't. Sue and Bill do but Tom doesn't. So could this be at least could this be a at least right here? If we had at least one among these three, if we had at least one or at least two, then this would not be a part of the whole thing, because it says it's possible that Tom and Sue and Bill will not all, that none of them will graduate. Now, if we had this included in it, then we couldn't possibly have at least, because at least says it's either at least one or at least two. But so if this was a at least big set of disjunctions, then we wouldn't have this. There wouldn't be not T, not S, and not B, because at least means there has to be at least one of them. So this is definitely not a at least, then we know off the bat this is a at most. But at most what? At most means that we could have done, we could have two, we could have one. So thus we have none of them will, or one person will, or two people will graduate. So we know that this is a at most two, since we have this which means none of them will, these three which means one of them will, and this one which means two of them will. So it's a at most two. So how do we translate this? There's different ways to do it, but I would say given Sue, Tom, and Bill at most two will graduate. And there it is. Now, SL is very complex in this regard, because if we're talking about at least one or at most one, stuff like that is going to mean that we have a very long answer. But to go from English to SL and have a at most or a at least, it's much more difficult. Or I mean, it isn't difficult. It's just not easy, I should say. So, but I want to say that once we get to predicate logic or quantificational logic, we don't have this anymore, because in that kind of logic we have these two symbols, the backwards E and the upside down A, where instead of doing this, we would do something like this, saying that given X, given some individual, some or there is a X that will graduate. It's saying there is this says some or there is a, but that's a whole different thing, and I do plan on getting into that. So having done that, let's go to 6, and then we'll end this installment of my sentential logic videos. And I guess the best thing to do in anything is to identify our main connective. So what is our main connective of this one? This one, it's the horseshoe. What is our main connective of this one? Wedge. And of this one, it's obviously a wedge. And I did put parens around these two wedges, or these two wedges, or these two wedges, or it's. You have to put parens somewhere because you can't have something like G wedge S wedge Y. You can't have that in the system. You have to put parens somewhere, which either this or this. Anyway, that doesn't matter. So what is our main connective of this? Definitely horseshoe, if then. So this is just saying that tilde S ampersand tilde T ampersand tilde B horseshoe X ampersand A ampersand Y. So I'm gonna erase this number 5 here so I don't have to crouch down. We know that S means Sue will graduate, and T means Tom will, and B means Bill will. So I would go about it like this: if Sue, Tom, and Bill will not graduate, then they all. We could go they all, or they could go Sue, Tom, and Bill must. They all must stay another year. Because X means Tom will stay another year, A means Bill will stay another year, and Y means Sue will stay another year. So if Sue, Tom, and Bill will not graduate, then they all must stay another year. So this was a little more simpler than the other way around. It's much more simpler than English 2SL, because in English, given our main connectives, which are tilde, ampersand, wedge, horseshoe, triple bar, given our main connectives, there are so many different words for each of these, which could hint at the connective being thus. And this one is obviously the king, because there are about an infinity, or at least like 2,000 different words, which could hint at this being the connective. So, if you think I've left something out or done something wrong, definitely comment and tell me below, because I'd love to hear from you. Or if you have a question about the System SL, or some kind of question about anything, also comment below, because whenever you comment, I get an email. And if your comment is constructive, then I will always respond. So thank you.